the man who commanded Union forces in their final destructive campaigns in the South, rushing through Georgia and Carolinas. His troops known him as Uncle Billy, yet for white Southerners, the name General William Tecumseh Sherman brings up images of the worst of mankind and the Satan incarnate. Sherman, who famously said, "War is hell," brought the true hell of war to the South. He was one of Grant's closest friends and played a key role in bringing the violent war to an end. However, the destruction caused by Sherman's march remains controversial, and many Southerners still hate him with passion. Let's take a deeper look into his biography. Sherman, one of 11 children, came from a well-known family. His father had been a member of Ohio's Supreme Court until his unexpected death in 1829. Senator Thomas Ewing adopted William, and when Sherman was 16, Ewing secured an appointment for him at West Point. In 1840, he graduated 6th in his class. His early military career was far from impressive. He saw some battles during the Second Seminole War in Florida, but unlike many of his comrades, he did not participate in the Mexican-American War, instead being stranded as an administrative officer somewhere in California. He married his foster sister, Ellen Ewing, in 1850. Sherman resigned from the Army in 1853 and went to San Francisco, which was experiencing a gold rush at the time. There, he began working as a banker, but his career was cut short by the Panic of 1857. His old Southern buddies, Braxton Bragg and P.G.T. Beauregard, found him a job as administrator of a recently established military academy in Louisiana. Sherman wasn't much of a critic of slavery, but he was strongly opposed to Southern secession on this issue. He constantly cautioned his Southern allies about the risks of competing with the wealthier, industrialized North, but they never listened to him. He left his job in January 1861, after Louisiana seceded. After the Confederate States of America attacked Fort Sumter, Sherman became worried that President Abraham Lincoln won't find enough troops to end the war quickly. But he overcame his fears, and his brother John got him a commission in the United States Army. Sherman fought in the First Battle of Bull Run, Virginia, where Union troops were heavily defeated by the Confederate Army. He performed miserably when assigned to command troops in Kentucky. Some newspapers described him as crazy due to his constant demands for reinforcements and general nervousness. Lincoln promoted Sherman to Brigadier General of Volunteers, and he also received praise for his actions. Sherman was publicly ridiculed as insane because both the South and the North believed the war would be quick and minor conflict. Sherman was one of the few people in the country who knew that such an aggressive war would require at least 200,000 soldiers to crush the revolt. This number could be compared to such cities as Boston or Baltimore. He was mocked as insane for this number, just as if he had requested 10 million men, and newspapers of the day rushed to print it as fact before anyone could contradict it. It wasn't until the Battle of Shiloh that people understood how brutal the war would be, and the war's events showed that Sherman's estimates were far too low. Sherman argued with Secretary of War Cameron in Louisville in Kentucky. He laid out a map of the country in front of Cameron and showed that in the east, General McClellan was given 100,000 men to hold a line 100 miles across the front. In the far west, Fremont had 60,000 men to hold a line also about 100 miles across. Meanwhile, Sherman had only 18,000 men to hold a line 300 miles across. Sherman was released of his duties in November 1861 and returned home to Ohio, where he struggled from depression and nervous breakdowns. Sherman regained confidence with the help of a new commander, Ulysses S. Grant. He used to say,
"Grant stood by me when I was crazy, and I stood by him when he was drunk, and now we stand by each other."
During the bloody Battle of Shiloh, after the Confederates approached the unprepared Union troops, Sherman and Grant fought bravely to prevent a panicky retreat and drive the Confederates back. Sherman fought brilliantly despite being wounded in the hand and having 2 horses shot out from under him. From that moment forward, the men would work together to achieve Union victory. Grant was widely criticized for his losses at Shiloh and considering retiring, but Sherman persuaded him to stay. Sherman remained with Grant in the West, ending in the capture of Vicksburg, Mississippi, a critical Confederate bastion. Union forces planned to dig up to the Confederate works, tunnel underneath, set black powder charges, and destroy the defenses. Sherman was in command of 15 Corps and provided important logistical support. The siege was a huge success, with the Confederates suffering nearly 33,000 losses and the Union losing only 5,000. At this point, the Union obtained control of the Mississippi River, which marked the turning point in the war. Sherman launched his campaign across Georgia in mid-1864, putting an end to Southern dreams for victory. He realized that in order to succeed, the Union would have to destroy Southerners' will to fight. Sherman was going to demolish everything in his path. Modern historians would refer to it as total war. His most famous quote,
"War is cruelty. The crueler it is, the sooner it will be over."
Sherman marched to Atlanta, the heart of Confederate industry, in May 1864. Sherman's army suffered tremendous losses at Atlanta. Hood and Sherman fought for the important Confederate city all summer, until Hood was forced to surrender on September 1, 1864. In November, Sherman burned down practically the entire captured city of Atlanta. More than 3,000 buildings, including businesses, hospitals, houses, and schools, were destroyed. Sherman built a vast supply stockpile in Atlanta throughout October. He then ordered a systematic destruction of the city to prevent the Confederates from restoring anything after the Yankees had left. Sherman's victory in Atlanta helped Abraham Lincoln win re-election to a second term. Sherman was now convinced that the Confederacy could only be defeated by completely destroying both its military and civilian ability to wage war. With Lincoln and Grant's full support, General began his legendary March to the Sea. He divided his troops into 2 corps, which ravaged through the countryside, destroying both military and civilian targets. The twisted train tracks along the way became known as Sherman's neckties. Georgians lived in fear of advancing armies, while the rest of the country was unaware of Sherman's march to the sea. Sherman's hatred of the press prompted him to ban journalists, and many Americans had no idea where the army headed after leaving Atlanta. Sherman's forces had devastated the land, destroying all supplies of food and forage, leaving a starving and despairing people. His men had no sympathy for Millen, the location of Camp Lawton, which housed Union prisoners. Confederate President Jefferson Davis had ordered Georgians to follow a scorched earth policy of poisoning wells and destroying crops, but citizens in the Army's way had refused. Sherman, on the other hand, burnt or captured all of the food that Georgians had stockpiled for the winter. Soldiers also wanted to teach Georgians a lesson. One soldier wrote in a letter home,
"It isn't so sweet to secede as they thought it would be."
Sherman's army arrived in Savannah on December 21, 1864, approximately 3 weeks after leaving Atlanta. The city was undefended when they arrived. The 10,000 Confederate soldiers who were meant to protect it had already run away. Sherman surprised President Lincoln with the city of Savannah and its 25,000 bales of cotton for Christmas. Sherman and his soldiers left Savannah early in 1865, pillaging and burning their way through South Carolina until they reached Charleston. South Carolina was treated possibly more cruelly than Georgia. As the first state to secede, it was also the state where the Confederacy first fired on federal Fort Sumter. The majority of the city of Columbia was burned to the ground. The March to the Sea caused $100 million in destruction, equivalent to over $1 billion in 2024. Cities were brutally devastated. Before the war ended, Sherman also accepted the surrender of Johnston and all troops in Georgia, Florida, and the Carolinas, which was the largest surrender of Confederate troops during the war. Some historians mention the death of his favorite son as the cause of these horrible acts. After Willie died from yellow fever, caught in Sherman's camp, he literally went insane with grief, and March to the Sea was the result of his insurmountable loss. In April, the Confederacy surrendered, and the Civil War was over. When Ulysses S. Grant became president in 1869, he appointed his friend Sherman general commander of the United States Army. Sherman, whose middle name, Tecumseh, a Shawnee Indian chief, led savage expeditions against Native Americans in the West. Like with the Southerners, he crushed the Indians' will to fight by not only killing their men, but also destroying the supplies they needed to survive. Sherman was merciless to the natives.
During an assault, the soldiers cannot pause to distinguish between male and female, or even discriminate age. As long as resistance is made, death must be meted out.
While Sherman believed that Native Americans slowed down progress and should be annihilated, he spoke out strongly against corrupt government agents who treated Indians unfairly on reservations. He retired from active duty in 1884 and eventually moved to New York. He declined numerous calls to run for political office, declaring,
"I will not accept if nominated, and I will not serve if elected."
Sherman died in New York on February 14, 1891, at age 71. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and press likes.